The American actor Dermot Mulroney once said, what people refer to as research these days is really just Googling. Now, you know most people, and no product manager can allow themselves to research as most people do. Because in today's environment, with companies and products go up and down every day, and without much of notice, you have to know your users and your market at least as well as you know your product. Market research is the process by which product managers accumulate and interpret information about market drivers, products, or services to be offered, and of course, it's about customers' needs. There are different types of market research, from competitive analysis to user insights, but all serve one big purpose, the holy grail of the PM work, to give us the feeling that we actually know what we are doing. Hello, leaguers, and welcome to today's Practical Wednesday, where we meet every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to advance your product management know-how. And today, it's all about market research for product managers. To enable decision-making the right way, it is crucial to conduct research and maintain an in-depth understanding of your competition and the industry as a whole, as well as the attributes, spending habits, and of course, the existing pains of your target market. There are frameworks and tools that can help you with that, and our guest speaker for today will teach you exactly that. By the way, nice to meet you. My name is Moriya Kassis, and I'm the founder and general manager of Product League, and we help you to become the best product manager you can be. Product League is an international mentoring program for product managers by product managers, and we would love to meet you and to get to know you better. So please comment in the comments below in the chat and let us know where you're from and who you are. So I'm waiting to get to know you, and I'm getting excited to know all your questions about research and how to do it right. If you want more tips, videos, and everything, so you could become the best product manager you can be, please make sure to subscribe to our channel or to like our page so we could invite you to amazing experiences like this one. Now, today, we have a very special guest joining us, Victoria Kazovsky, Head of Product at Kantar Marketplace, and you are the person to talk about this subject. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing great. Very excited to be here. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Very happy to invite you. And I want the audience to know why I'm so excited to have you here and what is your experience. So we are going to do a little intro here. Victoria Kazovsky has a long and varied tenure in the product and technology space in both big companies and startups. As the head of product at Kantar Marketplace, Victoria is currently leading the product and UX teams, building Kantar Marketplace next generation automated market research and insight platform. Before joining Kantar Insights, Victoria had a variety of product leadership roles with other companies in the market research and insight space like Lightspeed Research and Instantly, as well as companies in different industries like YP.com, Nimble, and Amdocs. And this is the exact experience that we need product managers in order to really know what is it to do when we're talking about market research and the tools and the frameworks and everything that goes with that. So thank you so much, Victoria, for joining us today. I'm really excited about the opportunity. What do you say? Are we ready to begin?
Let's do it.
Love the spirit. But before we will do that, I want to remind the audience that we're also going to take some questions at the end in a nice Q&A. So if you want Victoria to answer your questions about market research, and there's so many questions to ask about these topics, I can come with a few myself. Please make sure to comment in the chat, and maybe you'll be lucky enough to do that. With no further ado, Victoria Kazovsky, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you, and thanks again for the warm welcome and the impressive introduction. So, market research is a very broad term, sometimes loaded, especially for people that don't come from a research background. So before we start, I would actually like to do a quick poll with the audience here. to find out more about what comes to your mind when you think about market research. We're going to use a tool called Slido. Should be super easy. So if you're looking, if you're watching this presentation on your laptops or your computers, you can just use your phone and point it to the Slido code here. It should pop up the Slido presentation, and you should see a quick poll where you can just type in your answers. And I would really like to hear what's really your first association with market research. And it can be anything. It can be, what your biggest fear about it is, what you'd like to learn more, what really anything that comes to mind when you think about market research. So please take a moment to set it up. If you don't have a phone, you can just follow the link and put in the Slido code in there. We're going to have a few of those posts throughout our presentation. It's a way to, I always like to hear what, from the people I'm talking to and get your feedback as well. So please take a moment to set it up and answer our first poll. In the meantime, while we're waiting for the results, I will just build on what Moriya mentioned about my experience. So I've been in various product and technology roles. My background is actually in computer science. I started in as a developer. I did a degree in software engineering, had few years of doing that before I realized my true passion really was on the intersection of technology, UX, and business. And I moved to the bright side of product management. Looking back, also probably because I was a pretty annoying developer, always challenging the requirements and asking the hard questions of who's going to use it and why we're building this stuff. And my boss told me, no, you really need to be in product, and did me a big favor. So been doing this and loving this. But when I first started, my first product management role was actually for a market research company working on technology solutions for market research. And I had absolutely zero knowledge or very little about what market research is. They didn't teach this to me in my computer science classes. I never had to do it in my life. So when Moriya reached out to me and asked to talk about market research, I was thinking about what are some of the topics that would be useful from the things I've learned for over 10 years now working in the market research product industry. What are some of the things that would be helpful to share and I wish I knew when I just started? So let's see if we have some results coming in. No, we can't see the results for some reason. Okay. Bear with me for just a moment and see if that's working. Technical issues. Here. All right. Let me just do this for a brief moment. All right, looks like we're able to get results. So what people are saying, I see waste of time. Interesting, somebody wanted to be provocative. Trends, it's all about finding trends. Google, combination of research, industry competition and consumer, comparison. It's expensive, needs, stressful, interesting, pricing. So a lot of good stuff here. And I think, I hope we're going to cover a lot of those topics and alleviate some of those points through our conversation today. And we're going to touch on a lot of those topics that I hope are going to be useful. So we're going to do another poll, and I'm interested to hear from you in the companies that you are currently working at. Who is actually responsible for conducting market research? Is it your responsibility as a product manager? Some companies have in-house market research experts. or research departments. Maybe you're using an external market research consultancy firm, or you don't really do market research, which happens quite a bit, or maybe you're not even sure. So take a moment. I'd like to see where it falls. All right. Okay. Things are moving. I see people are answering. We'll give it another minute or two. All right, so it's interesting to see that actually, and it goes along with my hypothesis that in today's world, a lot of the time the responsibility is actually on the product management team to do market research. Some companies, usually the bigger ones, might have in-house research experts. A lot of the times, those are what I'm seeing are actually user research as opposed to market research. And we're going to talk about the nuances there and the differences. Some companies outsource their market research. So that seems to be a tie so far as people are going in. That usually comes with, obviously, some time and budgets. But I do see, about 10% that, oh, sorry, I got my options wrong here. So about 30% of the people that don't really do market research at all, which unfortunately is not surprising to me. We all know we need to be doing it, but sometimes either because of time constraints or skills constraints, we don't really do this. And so we'll talk about this more today, and hopefully, at least for the companies you are working for, that will help you change that balance a lot. One thing I forgot to mention, I'm based in Los Angeles, California, and we've been on pretty much stay at home since the whole COVID thing started. My kids haven't gone back to school for almost a year now. And, they think that because I get to do their schoolwork with them, they get to help me with my work. So when I was working on this presentation, my 5-year-old daughter wanted to contribute and told me I have to include a lot of pink. She loves pink. So I have to include a lot of pink in my presentation. So you're going to see some pink. And my son, who's 13, told me, Mom, you have to put some memes. Otherwise, it's going to be terribly boring. Market research is not interesting. So make sure you put some memes there. So bear with me as we go through. We're going to have some memes and some pink. So the first thing I wish I knew, and hopefully this is not new to you guys, but when I started as a product manager, this wasn't obvious to me, that market research is absolutely a must-have for your success as a product manager. My personal story, when I was just on my first job, moving from being a senior developer, moving to a product role, I had a lot of experience. I knew the product really well. I've been lucky enough to do a lot of customer visits and see our customers using our product and help them with support. So I felt like I really, really know the product well. And I had great intuition, which is I got my first job as a product manager in the first place. And then a few weeks into my new role, I came up with what I thought was a great new product idea, a new product direction. So I was super excited, and I went to my boss and I told him all about my new product idea. And it was actually a bit of a pivot for a new product direction and going mobile. Not going to get into too much details, but when I was going to my boss, I thought he's going to tell me, oh my God, this is a genius idea, let's go and build this. But instead, he told me, well, that sounds like it has some potential. Why don't you do some market research and put some business case around it? So we can ask for the incremental investment that we needed to go and build this. And I was completely lost. I thought, why do I need to do market research? I know, and I have my gut tells me this is such a great idea. But once I realized I'm not going to get away with that, and we're not going to go to our CEO and ask for incremental money just because I think it's a good idea. So once I realized there is no way around it, and I have to do some research, I was lost because I had no idea where to start. So luckily, I was working for a company that specializes in market research. I had a lot of research professionals and people that could help me along the way. So I learned a few things as I was, working on this, and I've been doing this for over 10 years now. But I think what I'm finding more and more is I'm not alone. Today, market research is an absolute necessity to being successful. You're expected to pretty much all your product decisions, from your competitive analysis to your requirements to positioning, needs to have some type of research. But a lot of the time, you'll find that even if your company outsources market research or uses an external firm, which doesn't happen that much, even if you do that, but when you're working on a smaller project or your own idea, or if you're at a smaller company or a startup, the responsibility falls on you. And regrettably, a lot of people lack the expertise, and more often than not, end up relying or leveraging their gut. So here's our first meme. There is so much to do when you need to do market research. Where do I even start? So first thing I wanted to spend time on is to talk a little bit about market research versus user research, because I see that coming up a lot, especially with product managers. Those two things seems to be intermingled a lot. And while there are a lot of similarities or some similarities between user research and market research, it's important that you understand how the two different and which one should be used for what. So market research is a way for businesses to get a realistic snapshot of a potential market. If you think about it in the most basic form, it provides you a broad, high-level understanding of your market or your industry in order to help determine if there is even potential for your product. So the questions that market research is intended to help with is there a market for your product? Who are your target customers and what challenges they have? Market research can help with market sizing. So how large is your total addressable market, or what we call a TAM? Market saturation. So what does competitive landscape look like in your space? And pricing. I saw some people mention pricing as well. Definitely market research comes in handy to look at what do potential customers pay for some of the alternatives, or what the market will bear in terms of pricing. When to conduct market research? Generally speaking, you definitely want to make sure you're doing market research in the early stages of your product development to verify whether there is sufficient potential demand for your product, but that's not the only time you do market research. A lot of the time there is misconception that you only need to do market research if you're launching a brand new product in the beginning. I will say that market research is absolutely essential for new products. Otherwise, your product is pretty much set up for failure. The number one reason, and I think everyone knows this, that so many companies and so many products fail is because they fail to achieve product market fit. And I'm not saying market research is there to gonna solve all of that, but at least it's gonna get you closer to having validation that anyone will eventually invest in your product. And that there is an unanswered need out there for it. I know we always say that, as a product manager, you need to fall in love with the problem and not with the solution. But market research, I would challenge it further, and I say you need to make sure you're falling in love with the problem that's actually worth solving for. Because if it's a problem that no one in the market cares about or willing at the end of the day to pay money for, it's not a problem you should really focus on and spend your time on. And this is also why the industry and the competition review side of market research is so important. But so we talked about, for new products, but market research can also help you find customers or new target markets for redesigned products. So when you're going through product redesign, or when you're expanding into new markets, and you need to make sure that your new market is going to bear it, market research is very important. So some of the market research methods, a lot of this is focused mostly on collecting quantitative insights. We're going to talk about the quant versus qual pieces, but a lot of it is quant, but there are some methods that also gather qualitative data. So some of the most common things, methods around market research are looking at literature, trade industry publications, running large-scale surveys, longitudinal surveys, interviews with experts in your industry, and competitive analysis. And I know, I believe Productly had an amazing session, which I listened on, specifically dedicated to competitive analysis, because that's definitely a core skill that a lot of us as product managers are doing. I will say, so I'm not going to talk too much about competitive analysis on this one. Definitely recommend that session. It was great. But when you're doing competitive analysis as part of your market research, it's less about feature-to-feature comparison. It's more about looking at your competitive landscape from the perspective of market share and what are the strengths and the weaknesses, and what's your window of opportunity to enter the market, and the importance of your target customers to your competitors. Are they focusing, they might have a similar product, but are they focusing on the same target market as you are, or a different one? And also it's important to learn your competition, to understand any barriers that you might hinder as you enter new market. So just to sum things up, market research isn't so much about asking people questions as it is about seeking information to justify investing in or passing on product development, right, or product investments. So for most company, at the end of the day, market research is about measuring the potential to make money. User research, on the other hand, even though it often overlaps with market research, particularly for products that compete with others that are already in the market, or products that are undergoing or an upgrade or a redesign, but the two are not the same. User research generally looks at a narrow population than market research. And user research focuses on learning about your user behaviors and your user needs and their motivations. So user research can help you answer questions about how your potential users currently solving the problem that we want to solve, how well do those solutions work for them, how current users are using your product or the competitor product, what the users wish they could do differently with the product, what changes we can make to the product to make users happier. So usually when you should be doing user research, typically it's only necessary, needless to say, after you've done your market research and has determined that, yes, there is a market out there and there is a problem that's worth solving for. User research is useful at various stages of product development lifecycle. So when you're deciding on what you want to build next, when you're validating a problem and a possible solution for the problem, definitely during the design process to make sure your potential designs are intuitive and are going to be useful for your clients. Some of the common methods are usability tests, focus groups, and customer interviews. So I know some of the things that also came up in our World Cloud when we first talked about it. Doing surveys with our users, analyzing user feedback elsewhere from different online forums and social media, review sites, and so on. We're going to talk more about the methods later on. But now, since we've got that cleared out and the difference between market research and user research, I would like to hear from you guys. So we're switching to Slido again. In the last months, how many hours did you spend on conducting market research? And I'm specifically calling out market research, which is different than user research. Remember that. And while we're waiting for the results here, I wanted to share some study that I found online. I don't know if how many of you are familiar with Pragmatic Institute. They're pretty big in providing product management training, product management, product marketing. They do certificate programs, pretty big in the US, but I think they have presence all over the world. And they've recently done a study of over 1,700 product managers. And the survey covers different topics. It's an annual survey, which I find very interesting. If you guys are definitely recommend look it up. It's on a variety of topics, but one of the topics was specifically focused on market research and how much time is being spent. And this is a little bit narrow because it's specifically about interviewing specific market research activities around conducting win-loss analysis of evaluators and interviewing untapped customer potential. But the findings were screamingly, I would say, alerting. So customer and evaluator feedback is critical for making market-driven decisions, yet the vast majority of the respondents spent less than 5 hours a month gathering feedback. So I'm going to go back to see if we can see our results now. No? I don't know why it doesn't update. Oh, yeah. Okay. So 100%. So this is pretty much, okay, let's see. Okay, we got some people spending a little more. All right, so it looks like, yeah. So the vast majority is probably around the same ballpark of less than 5 hours a month spent on market research. I would say there is a group here that does definitely better than the average, but still around 20 hours a month on market research. And there is a group here that doesn't do any market research at all, which I will say is unfortunate, but it's not surprising. I think it's overall as an industry, we don't do enough. I will say that even for us and for my team, being in the market research industry, for my teams, we don't do enough market research for our own products as well. And I would love to find ways for my teams to be able to do more of that as well. So, conclusion from all of this, both market research and user research should be ongoing throughout your product lifecycle. But it's important that you do both. They serve different needs and they're always better together. So user research and market research in combination will definitely get you more handle on the data. My personal tip, especially as you grow through your product management career and get into more senior and more leadership positions, and you want to get promoted, having an understanding of your market and being able to show that becomes super important. And it's a very valuable skill to be able to position yourself as a more strategic player on your team. So let's get into some of the terminology things and get that cleared up. Market research landscape, there are 3 big buckets or 3 broad categories of product manager techniques. If we want to break them down, there is the product manager's intuition, and then we have what's called primary research and secondary research. Product manager intuition is a combination of your domain knowledge, your skills, your experience that you bring to the table. And don't get me wrong, intuition, I think, is very valuable and is super important for product managers. And it's often the main reason you get hired as a product manager in the first place. But unfortunately, it's very hard to justify a particular opinion aside from the statement based on my experience, or I think it's a great idea. Intuition can be independently tested to see if it's valid or not. And that's where market research with the various techniques comes to help. So primary research is a term for the type of research that you conduct yourself. So, or hire somebody to do it for you. But it involves going directly to the source. And usually it's customers or your prospective customers in your target market, and you ask them questions or you gather information. And there are a lot of methods in that bucket. We're going to talk about this again in more details, but some examples of primary research are doing customer interviews, surveys, looking at analytics data is also primary research because it comes directly from the source, focus groups, observing customers, and so on. Secondary research is a type of research that has already been compiled and gathered and organized and published by others. So this includes existing industry reports, studies by government agencies that have done, trades, trends reports, trade associations, or industry or businesses in your industry that have done research and published it. For small businesses with limited budget, a lot of the research is typically secondary because it can be obtained faster and it's much more affordable than primary research. And there's a lot of primary research available right now today on the web. You can just Google the phrases or the type of the information that you're looking for. But you can also subscribe to your industry publications, magazines, go to conferences, contact your industry associations, all of that good stuff that should have a lot of research. My only note on that is when you do find secondary research that way by Googling or looking at publications, make sure you check the publication date and be sure that the data is fresh and is not outdated. Because I've been burned a few times on that. So what are some of the popular research methods used by product managers? Analytics data, definitely a big one. Surveys is a popular one. Doing focus groups with customers, doing one-on-one customer interviews, usability tests, A/B testing, listening in on sales calls, doing ethnography, user or client observations, which means observing the users or the clients while they are using your product in their natural environment, competitive analysis, and then research in public and industry and commercial sources. Those are the top 10 that, based on my experience, I've seen being used the most by, the methods being used the most by product manager. I might be missing something, so I'd love to hear from you what other methods people are using in the audience. So you can just comment in the chat or post in the chat. Would love to see what other people are using as well. But there are so many methods. Which one is the best one? And when to use which one? So while it's not realistic to use the full set of methods on a given project, nearly all projects would benefit from multiple research methods and combining insights from different research methods. Unfortunately, a lot of product teams only use one or two methods that they're most familiar with or most comfortable with. So the key question is what to do when. And the short answer is it depends. And it really depends on what questions are you trying to answer. So a framework that helps you better understand when to use which method. I find this useful. It's a three-dimensional framework that looks at different aspects of research methodologies. So one is, the first dimension on this is the qualitative versus quantitative. This is the one that probably most everyone is familiar with when thinking about market research. So quantitative research concentrates on gathering and analyzing large amounts of data, typically via surveys or questionnaires. Analytics data such as recordings of user interactions, heat maps, or website analytics are often also the most common for quantitative analysis techniques for product managers. Qualitative data focuses on gathering subjective data like transcripts from in-depth interviews or focus groups or video recordings. So qualitative research provides more insights into the research subject thinking or behavior, but it typically lacks the statistical rigor that the quantitative research offers. So if you look at, in terms of the questions you're trying to answer and when you're thinking about what technique to use, qualitative is all about, who and how and why. And quantitative is all about how much and how many. The other dimension that is important to understand is the attitudinal versus behavioral. And the distinction here can be summed up as what people say versus what people actually do. And quite often the two are quite different, and we're going to talk about that in more detail. But the purpose of behavioral research is to understand what people are actually doing with our product or in our market. And attitudinal research is usually to understand or measure people's stated beliefs, which is why a lot of the time attitudinal research is heavily used in product marketing when thinking about positioning and things like that. This was attitudinal versus behavioral. And the last dimension is the context of product use. And the context of product use is a third distinction that has to do with whether people you're conducting research with or part of your research studies are actually using or interacting with your product or the service that you're researching about. So you have the natural context, which is near natural use of the product. They're doing it in their day-to-day in the natural environment. Scripted use of the product, which a lot of times is used in usability lab studies, which is very prescribed, and you tell them specific things you want them to do and provide feedback, or that contextualize, which is when getting research when people are actually not using your product while you're doing the study. So with natural use, obviously your goal is to minimize interference from the study in order to understand behavioral attitudes as close to the reality as possible, which gives you greater validity, but it gives you less control over the topics that you want to learn about. So many ethnographic field studies are aiming to do that, even though I would say that there is always some observation bias as well when you're observing customers or users in their natural environment. But data mining or different analytics techniques, clickstream analysis are also in this bucket here are more of a quantitative examples of natural use of your product, because you can get data from what people actually did on your product, right, or on your site or on your platform. Scripted study of product usage is done in order to focus the insights on more specific usage aspects. So, for example, if you just redesign your onboarding flow, you want to focus just on that, and it, your insights are focused more towards that, and that's where scripted types of research become more visible. So again, there is tons of methods here. I try to put a map here of the different methodologies against those against this framework that helps to think about when is the right method to use, depending on what the questions you're trying to answer. All right, so I wanted to talk about some of the pitfalls to watch for and also some tips. So one of the biggest challenges with market research, and here comes a big surprise, but there can be pretty big discrepancies between what people tell us, whether it's in surveys or in focus group or in-depth interviews, to what actually the truth is. And it happens due to various factors, but research respondents tend to sometimes over or underclaim certain things, especially when you're doing attitudinal type of research. So we have a team with Kantar who specializes in research innovation, and they do a lot of research on how to make research better. And they just published their really exciting white paper where they really investigated, what are the reasons behind why in research settings, sometimes it's so hard to get to the truth and why that happens, and also offered some suggestions about how you can actually get closer to the truth when you're doing research. So I wanted to share some of the findings with you. I find it super exciting. It's interesting. If you want the full white paper, I'm happy to share a link after. But those are just some of the examples of the study that they run to show how research answers can vary from what the truth is. So, for example, and that team is in the UK, so they did, it's a UK-based research. But, for example, in the UK, it's known that only 60% of the people of the population vote. But if they ask people if they will vote in the upcoming election, 80% of the people said that they will. Another interesting one here was that everyone thought that they're better than average at their job. Well, 82% of us, where in reality, only 50% of us can do better than average. So another one here, which I found interesting, was a survey of couples where they asked each partner how much of doing the dishes they're doing. And the responses added up to a total of 130%. And the interesting factor was that both sides were thinking that they did more than the other side. So those are just few examples. And when I talk about how do you tackle this? So as part of the research that they conducted, they came up with few learnings about how to get closer to the truth when you're conducting market research, and I wanted to share some of those with you. So some of the reasons why people may not always give truthful answers. People sometimes will consciously lie because they want to qualify to participate in surveys. This is especially true if you're doing consumer-based studies and you're using one of those consumer panels where people are actually getting paid or incentivized to participate in research. Some people are actually taking surveys for their income, right? So a lot of the time, they will consciously lie just to qualify to be part of your research group. There is also white liars, so people sometimes stretch the truth to make things easier for them, whether it's, it's true for surveys, but it's also true for other research techniques as well. Sometimes a chain, because people generally can be dishonest to varying degrees as a result of, they might not feel so great about their circumstances or their points of view, and they have the tendency to present a better image of themselves when they're in the research setting. Social compliance, a lot of the time, is a big factor. So, and people a lot of time will answer in the way that whoever is conducting the research, they think is expecting them to answer. So, if you basically ask them, do you like this new product? A lot of the time they will say yes, because they think it's somehow going to be helpful to you in some way. And some of it is just self-delusion. Respondents sometimes in research are not being good judges of their own behaviors and values. So I think a lot of this is probably common with general reasons of why people lie, not just in research, but in general. But there are, other than those factors, there is also a lot that has to do with research methodology and specifically what questions and how you're asking them. So some of the factors here are, for example, leading questions. If you're asking a badly worded question, can guide people to answer in a certain way. So you need to be very careful about how you're phrasing it. If your questions are too difficult, people might find it hard to answer. Unrealistic questions or questions that are outside of context are leading a lot of the time for confusion. So, a basic example of that would be if you're just asking someone, what is your favorite color, when you really want to know what is your favorite car color, as an example, right? And so somebody might say their favorite color is pink, but it doesn't mean they really would drive a pink car. Boring or annoying question, or sensitive questions is another example, and general fatigue in the survey process. And this is, again, true for surveys. Still see a lot of people write in surveys that are, 20, 30, 40 questions, and people just want to skim through this and get it over with. It's also true when you're doing it in a research setting outside of a survey, if you're doing more of a qualitative stuff. If you are asking too much or too long, people get fatigued and will stop responding, honestly. So some tips or pitfalls specifically, make sure you're asking the right questions. Few examples, few tips specifically. When you're asking your questions, phrase them to be based on your recent behaviors as opposed to general. So this was, one example when we asked them about, how important is it to eat together as a family? 92% said yes. Versus if you ask people how many times last week did they eat together as a family every day, only 36% said yes. So try to make it more about behavior than attitude as much as you can in your research. Another good example of this was our poll that we ran, right? I'm sure that if I would have asked you, how important do you think is it for product managers to conduct market research? A lot of you would say it's super important. But when we looked at how many hours in the last months you've actually spent doing this, those numbers are much, much lower. So yeah, try to make things based on recent behaviors as opposed to general questions. Another tip here is to use what's called anchoring. So using more realistic and comparative anchoring. In general, people in research, when you're talking to them, your respondents tend to be very enthusiastic about new products and new product ideas when you present it to them in the research setting. And in a typical, especially if you're doing like a new product evaluation or new product idea, if you ask somebody if they would consider buying the product, you might expect that about 70% of the people say that yes, which is really not that very useful when you know that in reality, less than 1% of new products ever gain more than 5% of sales traction. So a solution to this is to ask question in a more comparative context. Instead of asking, will you buy this, you might want to ask them what they currently buy and then ask how likely how likely would they buy this new product instead? And then, you might get a much more realistic answer and insights from that. Another tip here is use open-ended questions. That's one of the best ways to get closer to the truth, is to ask unprompted open-ended questions and really examine to see what people are saying. And sometimes it's even more interesting to see what they don't say. So here's just one example of a question that was used to find out why people choose their brand of shampoo. And they compared the responses between a prompted list, when they give them 9 options, with spontaneously asked questions. And you can see that when spontaneously asked what were the reasons, there were over 100 different factors that people mentioned. But price and smell were the first 2 most popular ones. While when we questioned, in the prompted question, the results were price actually came in second. And the other interesting factor was the first one was environmentally friendly. A lot of people said that environmentally friendly is super important to them when it was in a list of, multi-select questions. But when it was an open-ended questions, environmentally friendly wasn't even mentioned. So open-ended questions, always great, whether it's in surveys or in more qualitative stuff. But some of the challenges with that is those do take more time to analyze. If you are doing those in a survey, make sure you don't have too many of those because I'm sure many of you have taken a survey in the past. People don't want to type too much; they just want to choose an option. So if you have too many of those, and because from a responder perspective, it takes time to think through your response and write it down. So make sure you don't overdo it. All right. Our next tips here is make sure you're asking the right people. Make sure you have your respondents are in a good pool. You are talking to the right target audience, and you've got a balanced representative, especially if you're doing quantitative, statistically significant sample. If you're using consumer panels, make sure that you use online panels that use anti-fraud measures or apply quality measures to make sure that the people that are participating in the research are actually being honest and there is not too much fraud there. All right. Other things here is, so you've done your research, you've collected all your data, and the last step is the data analysis side of things. So super important, don't overlook this step. Is the step where you look at your data and you actually try to make insights or make decisions out of it. So learning about data organization or statistical methods can be helpful there. My other tip here also is don't keep whatever research you do and whatever findings you have, don't keep it to yourself. Disseminate and present it and share your research results with your team, with your stakeholders, with the broader business. I think it's important to show research because I think it brings a lot of value for your product organization and also getting everyone aligned behind some of the reasons why you're doing certain things. And my last one here is use the data that you get from research responsibly and be ready for unpleasant surprises and embrace. And what I mean by that is a lot of the time you go into a market research project with some hypothesis already, right? You have a product idea or a product, or an idea for a new market launch. And sometimes the results of your research would not necessarily support your hypothesis. But you're so in love with your great idea that I see a lot of the time people will just cherry pick from the insights that they get, the stuff that really supports what their original idea is, and they ignore the things that are red flags or things that are not necessarily supporting their research idea. And that's very common, but it's very important that you say true to yourself and you really look at the data and be ready to handle the truth. So what else? I know we're running short of time, so I'm going to try to go as fast as I can, but I'm happy to answer questions if people have any follow-ups. Obvious things, make sure you have clearly defined goals when you do your research. Make sure you use the right type of research for the right goals. Again, remember the framework that we talked about that can help you choose what types of research methodologies to use, and also combine a mix of research methodologies. I'm often asked a lot, what's better? Qualitative or quantitative? And a lot of product managers will prefer quantitative research techniques for a couple of reasons, because it offers results that are statistically significant and people are more comfortable with having numbers, and you can do statistical analysis. Or, sometimes it's because people are not comfortable in doing in-depth customer conversations, or those are harder to organize. And some people, it's the other way around. And a lot of the time, it's, what's really better? Is it the numbers or is it the story? And my tip on this is, there is this assumption that often market research will provide you enough cold, hard facts that your plans will be great and anyone opposing won't be able to argue. In reality, facts are best understood in the context of a good story. And that's where qualitative research can help you with really finding that story to support your numbers. So my tip is any decision you make is best if you start with the story and then you support it with the numbers. So common tools, I don't think we're going to have time to talk about this today, but I'm happy to share. I think, Moriya, we can share the slides with some references to some of the most common tools we can talk about later. Happy to answer questions. And one thing I really wanted to touch on is the importance of market research, especially today in the environment with the general pandemic or the global pandemic. I will argue that market research today is more critical than ever because everything is shifting so much. Consumer attitudes are shifting and you know how to respond. So if you're in B2C, really encourage you to look at doing market research to help answer how consumers are responding to this crisis and the implications in the countries where you're running your product. For B2B, how our customers' behaviors are changing in your industry or your product category and what your customers expect from your product right now. If you're in product marketing, what do customers expect from your product brand and how your content resonate during crisis. Emotional relation and empathy with our customers today during COVID is super important. And market research can help with that. If you're a manager, especially if you're running big teams, you should be doing research to make sure how your fellow employees are feeling on your team. And really for everyone, how will this crisis impact your product's long-term prospects is really important. And now is the time to do this. And luckily, a lot of the market research techniques today with online data collection and reporting, the physical distancing should not prevent you from generating the insights that you need. There are a lot of tools that you can do things yourself, enabled by technology that will allow you to get faster and affordable feedback. And really, I think that's what's going to determine, how your company can pivot to stay relevant if it needs to the ongoing crisis. So how to get started? Make sure you set time on your schedule to do research. With everything else going on, it's very easy to get tied up with the tactical stuff, but make sure you're setting up time. If you need help, reach out and ask people to help, whether it's a more senior product manager on your team, whether it's an internal researcher if you have on your staff, or if it's an external market research companies. If you're a manager, if you're in management positions, help set your team for success, whether it's by enabling them to spend more time on research in their day-to-day jobs, whether it's fighting for budget to put towards research, or if it's in training and bringing your teams the skills that they need. And it's a very pink slide, so should help, should make my daughter hopefully happy. I think that's all I had for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope this was helpful, and I hope we have some time for Q&A.
We do, of course we do. And it was the research about market research. So thank you very much, Victoria, for that. And the audience can look for the link to download the amazing file you created just for them in the chat. You'll find in the comments, everyone. And we do have an interesting question coming from NS from India. And he's going back to what you asked before earlier on your talk about the time allocating product managers put into market research. And he's asking straightforward, with 100% of my time dedicated to the product development process, how much time should I put into the process of market research?
Well, that's a good question, and very, very good one. I will say any time is better than no time, right? I don't think there's a golden standard. I think it also depends, obviously, on what stage your product is in your product development lifecycle. But in general, I think now is a perfect time. A lot of us are going through goal setting for the new year and setting up OKRs or whatever you guys are using for goals. What I'm trying to do for my teams is I'm trying to set specific goals around research, and in terms of number of hours or number of client interviews or number of data analysis and market analysis metrics. So I think the answer is it depends, but I think you should put as much as you need to make sure you really, really understand your market and understand your users.
And as you said, focus on the output and not on the number of hours that you put into it, but the number of users or interviews or, just people that you talk with, from the industry. Focus on the output. This is a great, great tip. May I challenge you before we close this session?
You can try.
That's the spirit. So we're product managers. With that in mind, we're all about prioritization. So if we are to choose one thing that you would like everyone in the audience to remember tomorrow morning when they start a new day, a new work day, when we're talking about market research, what is one thing will be, and I'll give you some time to think about it because I want to remind the audience that we want their love. So please make sure to like this video and to like our channel or page, wherever it is that you watch us. So Victoria, what is this one thing that we all keep in mind when it comes to market research? I told you it's a challenge. I warned you.
I would say one thing for me, if you take away from this, is just start somewhere. If you haven't done market research before, pick one area, one methodology, and just give it a try. Or if you've done only one type of research, just try it and do it and fight for however you need to fight to make sure you spend the time on this.
Just do it, guys. Thank you very much, Victoria. I learned a lot. How was the experience for you?
was great. I hope this was useful. I know we've been a little rushed at the end, but I hope it was useful. And I'm, again, happy if you guys want to connect or reach out to me afterwards. And I hope the tools PDF is going to be useful for the team here.
I'm sure it will help everyone in the audience. Thank you very much. From Los Angeles, this was Victoria Kazovsky, Head of Product at Kantar Marketplace. I am Moriya Kassis. This is Product League. Thank you so much for watching us, and we can't wait to see you in our audience at next week events. Until then, go league it up. Bye-bye, leaguers. Victoria, again, thank you so much. I had a pleasure having you on our stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Moriya. Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.